Now, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome to this evening's Audit Committee meeting. We've got quite a lengthy agenda, so let's move on as soon as we possibly can. In terms of apologies, I've received apologies from Councillor Earl and Councillor Oldham, but no other apologies. Are there any other apologies anyone else has picked up? We are quorate, but if there are any other apologies, perhaps people can mention them now. No? Okay.
No further apologies, Chair.
Okay, that's fine. Let's move on to item 2 then, the minutes of the last meeting. Hopefully you've had a chance to have a look at those. Perhaps we can take them page by page. Page 1.
Yeah, I've got a comment on that. I wasn't at the meeting, but I noticed at the bottom of page 1 it says Gurpreet said we would produce a statement of accounts, or confident we'll produce a statement of accounts by July or June. That statement of accounts is incorrect. I assume that meant head of internal audit opinion.
All right, okay. Well, perhaps Maisie or Ed, we can make an amendment there just to clarify that point. Thank you for that. Anything on page 2? Page 3? Page 4? Page 5? Okay, I'm happy to accept them with that one amendment as a true statement of the last meeting. Can I have someone just to second that from the member group?
Councillor Stone is indicating, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, okay. Item 3, deputations, public addresses. I'm not aware of any deputations or public addresses. Item 4, declarations of interest. Do I hear any declarations of interest? No, thank you. Item 5, I've not been made aware of any matters of urgency, so we'll move straight on to the main agenda, as it were. Now, at this point, in terms of the agenda, we'd normally be moving to item 6, the internal audit update. But we have got an additional paper that was introduced slightly later than the normal process, and it's refers to the update on the preparation of the 1920 accounts. It's got the Chief Finance Officer's name on it, but I think we've also got some additional support on that. But perhaps, Stuart, as the Chief Finance Officer, can I just start with you in terms of introducing the paper, please?
Thank you, Chair. We obviously had hoped to bring the statement of accounts for 2019-20 to this meeting, which was the main purpose for having it. We've encountered a few technical issues, and therefore we've had to provide you with this note saying that we can't yet produce them. We will publish them for the end of October, so we would look to an audit committee in October to do that. My colleague from LGSS/NCC, Jean, is available to answer any questions if anybody would like to, or possibly give a bit of comfort as to what the issues are. Jean, would you like to add a few words?
Just to say that we're making very good progress. We've just hit a number of issues that means that our ledger balances are still moving a bit, which has prevented us from pulling off the final core statements. And very regretful. We were hoping 2 or 3 weeks ago that we would have a set of accounts by now, but we're simply just not there, and we want to make sure that they're right first before we bring them to you.
Okay, thank you. Can I perhaps, first of all, just open that up to members? Any questions from members in terms of the paper?
Councillor Stone is indicating, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Stone.
Thank you. I'm rather concerned about this, and I'm rather concerned because we're going through lots of change, and you know, we're looking at a huge transition to a unitary authority. And the reason I'm concerned is because we've got a whole history of things not working out to time or proving to be more complex because of the changes in staff or vulnerabilities around staffing. And I'm guessing that this is a case in point here. So one of the issues I'm really worried about is how, and maybe Joe can help here, is how we manage when we don't have enough staff. Do we bring new staff in? But how do we manage handovers when staff leave and staff come in? You know, is there a handing over process? Because really by now, it shouldn't matter, should it? You know, and this is going to be with us for a long time, these transitions and transformations. So we need to get used to having things so streamlined that handing over one piece of work to somebody else doesn't hold anything up. So I am worried about that.
Okay, perhaps if I can come back to that on that point. I think your point is well made. I think in terms of the accounts per se, and I know you were making a more general point there, Councillor Stone, but in terms of the accounts per se, it might be helpful if Stuart can perhaps provide us with a sense of when the panel will be, or the committee will be, hopefully receiving the accounts. I know we're hoping to see them tonight, but if there is any indication from the work that LGSS are doing when the committee will see the accounts, that might be helpful. And then the wider point in terms of the general support on issues that are pertinent to Northampton Borough Council at this point in time, and the handover. I don't know, Stuart, if you could make any comments on that. I know that that's not all in your box, as it were, but whether you or indeed Joe would want to comment on that particular point that's been raised by Councillor Stone.
So I think the issue we've got at the moment is that we are going through unitary. LGSS is demising, so we procure our financial support from LGSS, which is going through its own reorganisation, and with the advent of unitary, certainly we don't disagree. Transitions should be easier, but it depends on how much notice you get as staff move on, and what state the actual information's in and the systems. Part of our issues has been that EY hasn't managed to do as much work as we'd hoped on the previous set of accounts, so that we would have had a better understanding of any future issues. Don't disagree, but until we understand what's going through with LGSS and NCC's own reorganisation, we are working to we're commissioning a service. Jean is the lead for year end for us at the moment. I'm in active conversations with the senior management on that side to try to make sure things work smoother, and have had a conversation with the chair earlier about how we transition towards the new unitary in respect of March and handovers.
Just to add to that, and Stuart's right, we have had a conversation, Councillor Stone, on this to ensure that the transition is as robust as it possibly can be. And there will be conversations between Stuart and senior managers in LGSS, and Stuart has suggested, and I'll pick him up on this suggestion, that I'm part of that discussion, because it is important that there is a smooth a possible transfer as possible.
Chair, is the issue capacity, or is it people coming in, handover, or is it both? I need to understand what the actual issue is. I'm fearful that it's also a capacity issue. You know, I don't understand why handovers can't happen. People don't just leave their job, they give their notice in. People don't just appear, they're appointed. There must be some way of managing that better. So I'm also worried in case we're under capacity.
Yeah, if I answer that, and I don't, I'll start with that, and if Stuart wants to come in on it, I think I'd say two things on that. One is at this point in time, I'm not close enough to the detail on that, but I would strongly suspect that the issues will be variable. There'll be some that will be more problematic because of some of the history of particular issues, and Stuart's made reference to the final accounts and so on. Clearly, if we would have been in a position where we'd have liked to have been in, then when it comes to finishing the accounts for this financial year, that would have been a much smoother process and so on, but we're still fighting with history. But I would have thought in other areas of the council, they're probably facing quite those same difficulties. But I hasten to add on that I'm not close enough to the detail to say that with any real certainty. Stuart, Joe, I don't know if either of you want to add to that.
We are suffering from some capacity, but some of that is if the market doesn't have resources that we can acquire, then we have to work with the resources we've got. It's not because we're not trying to make savings or anything like that. We're actually just trying to use the people that we can that have got the right skill set to do the accounts and the finances, but that's across many other service areas. But we're also doing a resource drain on COVID and also contributing to the unitary. So it is the fact that all of this is coming through at the same time that's causing additional pressure. We don't have enough, if you chuck enough money at things, you can resolve anything, but we're not in a position where we can just pay all the time either across all the services. So it is about managing the priorities and only so many people can pull the accounts together. If we replicated June twice, only one of them can be online to actually pull the accounts together at that particular moment. So we do have some resource and capacity concerns, but again, that's the conversation we're having with the management.
Okay, thanks for that, Stuart. Any other comments on Stuart's paper?
Nobody's indicating, Chair.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Nobody's indicating.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so that I think just asked us to note the recommendation, so that's fine. If we can move on to item 6 in terms of the, if you like, the original agenda, internal audit update. Stuart, I don't know if you want to say anything by way of introduction, but I suspect that Gurpreet will be speaking on this one in some detail.
I think Greg's going to kick it off from BDO because the opinion comes first in the pack, and then I'll pick up the other 2 papers. Is the plan?
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll introduce the head of internal audit opinion, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Just talking mainly to page 11 of your papers, which is our overall opinion. The good news is we've actually given you a better opinion than last year. Last year we gave a limited opinion on your overall control environment. This year is moderate, which is our second highest. You can go one higher, which is substantial. But moderate indicates that on the whole, based on the audits we've done, the controls are working effectively, obviously with some areas for improvement. And I think that's reflected in the opinions of the individual reports. So to give a couple of examples, we've got 2 substantial opinions on design of controls this year. We had none last year. In terms of limited on effectiveness, we have 2 out of 8 this year. Last year was 4. Again, we have seen an improvement in terms of the audits we've looked at. We're also seeing an improvement on the implementation of recommendations. So last year the implementation rate was down at something like 20%. It's much closer to 80% this year. So that's really good to see. And in very challenging circumstances, I think it's very positive to see that officers have responded to the internal audit points and have implemented them. Just a few caveats, though, I will just mention. Obviously, this is based on the audits we've done. You'll see that they're not really finance-focused audits, so this doesn't really give you assurance that necessarily the external audit will be as positive. You'll obviously have to wait on that one. I think you've also got a couple of big challenges down the line when we report at the end of this coming year. Clearly, unitary status will be will create some challenges for you. We've seen that other clients where they've moved to unitary status, it's difficult to maintain that focus around controls when you're having, and this goes back to the debate you had just a few minutes ago, you've got turnover of staff, loss of corporate memory. It can be difficult to really get that focus. And I think the second area is clearly going to be COVID. And again, with remote working, the need to spend money in some circumstances quite quickly, it can be very difficult to maintain that controlled environment, make sure that the necessary controls over expenditure, procurement, etc. are still taking place. So we'll have to see how that works through when we do our work for this coming year, but clearly there'll be challenges ahead. But looking back, as I said, I think it's a positive report for the year just gone, but I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Greg. Any questions, comments from members of the committee?
Councillor Stone is indicating, Chair.
Councillor Stone.
Just very quickly, thank you for the report. I found it really interesting, and I really liked the way that you showed us the dates that were changing. The two areas that are giving me a bit of a headache are what's happening with the disability facilities grant. That doesn't look good, does it? That really, really doesn't look good. And I don't really understand what's going on there. Is that a capacity issue again? A changeover of staff not understanding policy and procedure? I don't really get that. And I'm worried about it because by its very nature, it's dealing with very vulnerable people. And so if we're not delivering a good enough service there, then I'm really worried about that. The other thing that I'm just curious about, I suppose, is that what kind of depth did you go into with the 106 money? Because I should imagine with changes of staff and all of that, that actually keeping tabs on what happens to 106 money over a period of years is quite a problem, quite problematic. So, if the data isn't kept up to date and if it isn't kept in a very accessible way, I should imagine that's quite a difficult thing to have a look at.
Yeah, if I take the second point first, I think we did find on the 106 that it was the older agreements that had more issues on them, finding the documentation. But we did notice a clear improvement as time went on, and we did notice that the newer agreements had much stronger arrangements. So I think that was brought out in the report, and there was work going on to make sure that the older information, as much as can be obtained, was obtained. So, and I think that is happening. On the disabled facilities grant, if you don't mind, I think I'll probably wait until Gurpreet's introduced the report, because I think he'll go through the detail of that report, and then perhaps we can pick up then about the the improvements that are needed over that and whether they're happening or not, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you for that, Greg. Any other comments from committee members? No. Can I just mention a couple of things? First of all, it was good to hear the improved position to moderate. I think everybody will be happy about that. And you touched on the challenge ahead in terms of unitary status, and I seem to recall reading something about the stability of the management team going into that process. Given you, I guess, your experience with working with other authorities on this, what are the sorts of things that, if you like, are the warning signs, or if you like, the signs that give you sort of cause for optimism? Have you got a sense of those sorts of things from the Northampton scenario as you understand it?
I mean, clearly, I mentioned before about turnover of staff. I think when we're seeing changes in teams, and as I said, loss of corporate memory, I think that does flag some issues. We mentioned in the report about the cohesiveness of the management team, and there have been, some disagreements, shall we say, through the year. I believe those are being addressed, but clearly, that that you need to have a very unified team going into what is going to be a very challenging period. So we would certainly want to see that happen, and a very clear purpose as to what's required, and clear contingency plans that if staff do leave, there's clearly going to be uncertainty. There's a lot of jostling for positions when we come up to unitary status about where people are going to be in the new authority. We really need to see that there's a strong grip on that, and that management are aware of what they will do if there are problems, if there's disagreements amongst staff, if there is turnover. You need to have a clear plan. Now, we haven't looked at that, so I'm just saying what in theory, the kind of things I'd expect to see in place, and hopefully they will be in place for the council.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that, Greg. I guess from what you've said earlier, I think you're handing over to Gurpreet to go through some of the detail. I've got a few questions there, but let's hear from Gurpreet to begin with in terms of the detail, perhaps.
Okay, so the next report as the pack flows is the follow-up report. So that's on 29 of the pack as I have it. So as Greg mentioned, actually, when you look at the prior years, the implementation percentages are actually reasonably high now. So it's taken a little while to get there, but actually we're in a better position, and that's reflected in the opinion. What you'll see on page 31 is some bullet points that summarizes the current position. So of the 19 that were due for the end of August, which we used as our date for this committee, we have got a number of those which are implemented. There's 1 high and 8 medium recommendations which are fully implemented. But however, there are 8 recommendations in this round, which is probably higher than what we've seen. There's good progress. This has probably slightly knocked it back, but this is again probably in line with where other local authorities are to some extent, because we would naturally expect what's happened over the last few months to have an impact on on the implementation. So you will see in a number of the incomplete ones reference to capacity and challenges with COVID that have led to a delay in the implementation of the recommendation. So this time around, there's a bit of a 50-50 split of those that are implemented and those that are not. But that doesn't take away from the fact that prior year ones have shown good progress to be implemented now, and that's improved. So you'll see on page 33, it starts with those which are complete. So unless there's any particular questions on those ones, and then on page 37 of your pack, it sets out those which are incomplete. On the right hand side, it then has the responses we received from officers for those that are not complete, with a follow on with some of our comments. But to save me kind of going through each of them, it may be easier just to take any questions you have on any particular follow-up elements if you have concerns with any of those which are overdue.
Any questions from committee members there? I can see Danielle. Yes, Councillor Stone.
Thank you. The thing that concerns me most is when we get difficulties with infrastructure. And I think that's going to be an issue as we go into reorganisation, isn't it? So I'm a bit concerned if we've got issues around IT, for example, or payroll or HR or whatever it is, because my experience at the county, for example, is that when those things start going wrong, the service providers find life almost impossible, and it's really difficult to keep a grip on service delivery. So I'm a bit concerned about those kind of areas being flagged up in the report.
I don't know if Stuart, could you sort of give any assurances there or any comment?
If there's any specifics from Councillor Stone, if you'd like to email the specific concerns, it's a very wide concern. We are fine on our IT, we are fine with our HR. We have work programs going forward for Unitary. So I don't have any specific concerns, so to speak. So you know.
And we're okay with cyber security and things like that, are we?
I am comfortable that we're protected with cyber security. You know, so all of these different audit reports come through. They highlight some weaknesses. We address them. our cyber is as good as it can be. I'm not going to tempt fate by saying otherwise. You know, Joe's got a hand up. You know, we do continue, but we don't have any material cause for concerns that's going to impact on any service areas at the moment.
Okay, sorry, was Joe wanted to come in on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of say that this was an audit report. Separate to this, we have a cybersecurity stocktake action plan that we're working on, and that was developed on, there was an LGA stocktake done. It'd be 18-19 and again for 19-20. And at the moment, we're about 86% complete with that. And we meet on a monthly basis.
Yeah, thank you for that, Joe. Okay, any other comments on the recommendations issues that Gurpreet has raised? No? Okay. Gurpreet, do you want to continue?
Yep, so after the follow-up report is our progress report. So on what is page 45 of your pack, and then on to 46, it gives a summary of our 19-20 work. So for the 19-20 work, asset management and disabled facility grant audits are complete, and we have a summary of those in this progress report. Safeguarding the field work is now underway. There were challenges with the service area that's involved there in terms of being able to facilitate our review, but that has now commenced and we've received things. So that should be, if there is an October committee, that will come to that committee to finish off our 19-20 work. So you can see a summary of the reviews for 19-20. And as Greg mentioned, actually there's a lot of moderate in there, quite a strong kind of pattern of moderate there. There's a few substantials. There are 2 limiteds which happen to be in today's pack that we'll talk about. But actually, when you look at that overall picture compared to last year, it's more positive on the reviews that we've done. What you also have in page 47 is the 2020-2021 internal audit plan. So that sets out the reviews in the plan and the current proposed dates that we have for those, and they've been discussed with officers to try and agree those dates. So the capital project one is underway, and the other ones are due to start in the next few months or so. I think a key focus on this year's plan is for us to get it as soon as we can complete, because the later we leave it, the closer you move towards unitary, the earlier we can get reports to you. There's an opportunity to try and improve those elements and before the kind of the first day of unitary. So I guess before going into the asset management and the disabled facilities grant summary parts of the report, is there any questions on progress of 19-20 or the 2020-2021 plan?
There's nothing from me. I just open it for other committee members.
Nobody indicating, Chair.
Okay. So yes, if you could, Gurpreet, just go through the detail on asset management and so on.
Yep, so on the asset management one, which is on page 48 of your pack, so this did lead to a limited opinion on both design and effectiveness, and there's 3 high findings, 3 medium and a low. So, I mean, overall, the authority, as you'll be aware, have a number of assets. I think it's around about 850 different assets, which might either be used for community or commercial use for a variety of different reasons. And so this review was looking at how are those assets identified, how are the contracts and the arrangements for them documented, are they reconciled between ledger systems and the fixed asset register that's in place, valuations if they're done on the property, and are they kept and maintained, and any kind of reactive maintenance type work, compliance work, and the audit trail of those in terms of purchasing properties as well, and if that's been documented. And so there are a number of kind of key concerns in this area. I think it wouldn't be a surprise in terms of this opinion. I think Stuart would probably agree that it's an area that they know that's been under challenge either for staffing reasons or other reasons in the last few years. So we were aware of that kind of coming into the review. But just to pick out a couple of findings, there's the first one, which is there isn't currently a reconciliation process that happens between the various systems. There's a fixed asset system and the Aggresso system. The reconciliation there doesn't happen. I know that that's currently underway and is taking place, but clearly without a reconciliation, you can't say for certainty whether all the records are accurate and complete. And so that's currently going on by management. We looked for valuations. So for each property, we'd expect to see valuations there or evidence of valuations for those properties. For the 26 that we looked at, 7 were missing or not provided. 1 was overdue because there's certain time frames within certain numbers of years that you have to do the valuations. And I think at the end as well, which is the final kind of bullets goes from page 48 to 49, it mentions about 2 out of 26 tenancies being out of date. 1 was missing. Some hadn't had rent reviews at the expected time periods. 9 were up to date for rent reviews, etc. So it kind of summarizes some of the key points from what we found. And given those areas of non-compliance or things not operating, we were led to a limited opinion on both the design and then also the effectiveness from that testing. So I'll pause on that one before going to the DFG one to see if there's any questions on this audit.
Yeah, can I come in first on this? There might be other people. Just, I suppose a general point from me to begin with is I think I've read somewhere on this one that we have got new senior manager or relatively new senior manager coming in. Clearly this one, the outcome in terms of your assessment makes it an outlier compared to all other areas, really. And I just wonder what your sense is of, if you like, grip of this issue going forward. I know it's not where we would want it to be at the moment, but do you get a sense that despite your criticisms, that there is a determination to move things on?
A determination, yes. I guess we can't assess that fully until we see the outcome of the follow-up that we do. But there were stronger management responses on this report than maybe typically we get. For example, on that first one about reconciling, the asset managers have come back and said they will be conducting this. They actually think that may be completed soon, and they have a commitment to do it annually thereafter. So now they've got the right structure and staff in place. You know, that there were reasonably strong management responses, which is an indication of their commitment to make sure that this gets done. I mean, Stuart may be better placed to give a view in terms of more about the culture of the team and whether they're well placed. But from my perspective, the management responses were reasonably sound. So hopefully these actions will get done. Okay, that's good. And the other specific was you talk about debt analysis and collection. Can you give any sense of how far we're off the pace there, and any sort of quantification? I've not got a sense from your report of whether we're talking about a significant amount of money there, or we need every penny, but is it a significant issue? That's right. I may just need to quickly refresh myself on that one. I know Stuart had his hand up. If he's able to put his point across, and I'll quickly just refresh myself, and I'll be able to answer your point afterwards. Okay, that's fine. Stuart?
So the committee's been very enthusiastic about us replacing temporary workers with more substantive workers, and so there is a history that's existed in that property group. We have been actively, through George, Chief Exec, recruiting and substantiating people. So in terms of assurance, we have some permanent people, we've got some fixed term people, but they are with us for a longevity, and we are actively reviewing most of these issues, which is just good housekeeping for a property team. So I just feel much of this is a legacy issue. If we were to have another look in a few months' time, as we will be checking up, then things will improve. I'm not going to say it's perfect. COVID has caught us out on some of this, but the fact that we're bringing forward some disposals from assets that we shouldn't be holding on to, we're doing some community transfers. We're doing much more we're much more rigorous on the administration. And in terms of the historic debt, there were some issues, and Joe's team had been actively supporting for the last sort of 6 to 9 months that group to understand their debt position and pursue it. So I don't think there's any material debt. There's still debt there, but we have gone down the Pareto view of check out the more valuable ones first.
Good, thank you for that, Stuart. Stuart, can I just ask you one other point on that? In terms of valuations that Gurpreet mentioned, obviously my mind sort of wandered into the problem of the past of the final accounts and valuations. Is this connected in any way? Does this put us at risk of having a repeat run of previous year's final accounts where we had a difficulty with getting an appropriate valuation?
It's one of the key areas why Joe and I have taken such an interest in how they resource themselves, what they do, and why Joe's team's been sort of keeping an eye on some of the administration. So some of the valuations were being done, but not necessarily recorded as cleanly. We will always have issues with our external auditors over whose view of valuation we should take, but it is an administration issue that we've not been capturing things as well as we should have. Right.
Okay. Thank you for that.
And just sorry, Chair, going back to your point on the asset management stuff, without quoting the figures, I do have them if you wish me to quote them. The level of debt for asset management at the 5th of January was about 1/5 of the level it was in August 2018. So it's only 1/5 now, so it's come down a significant amount over that period of time. Sure. And as part of the management responses, and it was in one of our recommendations, is there is now a monthly established tenancy schedule and arrears meeting that the asset manager has. So one, it's come down to 1/5 of what it was a couple of years ago, and yeah. Two, there's a monthly meeting to review these arrears as well, which we will follow up as part of our follow-up work. But that does seem to suggest that the change and actually the controls they've got in are likely to lead to more improvement.
Good. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I'm conscious, following your little presentation there, I haven't given members a chance to come in on any of those points. So any questions from committee members? No, I'm not hearing anything.
Councillor Marriott is indicating.
Oh, apologies, Councillor Marriott.
Yeah, there's only one thing, like you touched on it, Chair, because obviously if you see these failings with the assets and tenancies, then you start wondering what revenue the council has lost on this, you know. So I know he's saying about it's dropped by 1/5, but in quantity terms, I just wondered how much money the council should have seen and hasn't received. But obviously that's probably a bit more detail than he has tonight, but that's the only reason why I'm a bit concerned about some of the stuff.
Okay, thanks. I don't know if that's perhaps something that we could take offline and put something together.
Yeah, no problem with that. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Okay, does that complete the position on this item 6 in terms of the internal audits?
There's one more. There's one more.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Apologies. Right.
Sorry, there's the disabled facilities grant.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I did say that.
Report as well. So that's on page 50 of your pack. So this led to an opinion of moderate for design, but limited on effectiveness. And obviously the effectiveness is largely what's been drawn by the 3 high findings that we've suggested. So obviously disabled facility grants are administered by yourselves as a local authority, but the funding's provided to you by the county. If there are adaptations to properties and people meet certain criteria, they can apply for this funding, and the council will either support the construction of that work or oversee how the tenant has received their own quotes to get their own organisations in to deliver that. So as part of this, we look at the whole process and pick samples to see whether you've complied with the expectations in delivering in administering the disabled facilities grants. So the first high finding we had there, which is noted in the key findings on page 50, was there's an expectation to complete inspections prior to the work being done and then also after, but there's not evidence of that being maintained, and so there was a high risk there about the quality of work that's been delivered. there's a piece there around financial assessments for adult grant applications. And we found in 9 instances we couldn't see the evidence of that. So there seems to be something there that's not operating as it should do. There's weaknesses in the tendering process, and especially keeping evidence of 3 quotes going to contractors, because what a tenant can do, a tenant can either say, look to the local authority, can you take over the delivery of the construction of this property? Or they can, if they wish to, say, actually, we'll do the construction of this, and they'll get their own quotes. But the local authority's role in that is to make sure that they've seen evidence of those quotes as well from the individuals, or their own quotes if they're delivering it themselves, and kept maintenance of those. But there were weaknesses identified with those elements as well. And there was one deficiency with a grant paid out. There's a limit of £30,000, and it slightly went over that limit when you added all the different costings. So it's only a minor point there. So for those reasons, whilst the design of how things work are reasonably moderate, the arrangements are there. They're not always effectively being followed because the quotes might not be obtained or inspections may not happen. And so therefore the effectiveness has been judged to be limited on this one.
Okay, thanks. If maybe I can just come in first on this, because this, it doesn't read well, does it? Irrespective of how strong your design is, if there's no effective follow through in terms of people involved in the system, there's going to be some difficulties. And you pull out the key findings, which is helpful, but it seems to me there's a theme here all the way through the process of weakness, from the initial introducing of the work through all the way through the process. And I just wondered if you can put your finger on what that actually is, because it just feels like have we got a staff group here that's just not complying or not understanding what's necessary?
I mean, I agree with you that it's through the process, and that there's things either with the inspection of work stage, whether it's quotation stage, through to the post inspections that happen as well. I'm not sure if I know well enough the culture of the team to be able to give a full answer to your question. I'm not sure if Joe or Stuart may be better placed to give a view on that.
Okay. We always go to Stuart or Joe, which is sometimes unfair. So,
Chair, I will. So I do know that the team. So the housing group as a service has been obviously stretched by COVID, but in the past, it's recently undergone a reorganisation, specifically to try and address many of the sort of service weaknesses, because whether it's Audit Committee or Cabinet, councillors have expressed some concerns about different service bits that have been redeployed to meet emergent needs. So they did recently go through a reorganisation. Not all of the posts were filled. Again, the move towards unitary is impacting upon our ability to recruit. And it's even impacting on whether we can bring agency staff in to do some of the roles. There have been some examples, and I know Joe's team have actually followed through on a couple of specific issues where it hasn't worked out well. I do know that they are actively recruiting some more colleagues for this particular role. And I suspect with the one that went slightly over, it was a case of once you've committed to doing a piece of work, and you've got a threshold of 30,000, do you suddenly say I won't do a specific railing or whatever? So it's not always possible. So 1 over the 30k is probably in the margins of it's okay, not ideal, but it's okay. But I think the team itself knows what they've got to do. And are currently trying to resource themselves to do it. And just for councillors' benefit, this is for private housing only. All of our own tenancies in our own stock has to be delivered separately outside of DFG by MPH as part of HRA. So this is all private owners and private tenants. None of this relates to our own housing stock. just to give you an assurance.
Yeah. Thanks, Stuart. Gurpreet, can I just go back to you on this? In terms of your process, are you planning to have a further look in this area in the foreseeable future?
Yes, so per our normal follow-up process, for all of our findings which are high and medium, we will follow them up when the due dates are due to then see what arrangements they've put in place to change. So with the quotations or with inspections and so on, we'd want to see evidence about how they now have those arrangements in place to make sure that those gaps are not missed, or triggers for when spend hits 30,000, etc. So we will be following these up. And just looking at the dates, all of the dates from the report we issued have implementation dates of September or October. So, possibly not for the October meeting, for the ones that are due in October. For the one after, we'd have a full update to say whether they've implemented these and things have moved on.
Okay. It would help. I take your point about it may not be ready for the October meeting, but if you could make a note to maybe contact me if you don't feel there's been particular progress there. Perhaps we could have a conversation in October, even if we don't get to the point of having the report in front of the committee at that stage.
I mean, the reality is, if it is enough of a concern, if you like, for this committee, whilst the due date is October for some dates, depending on when the committee is, we could still go to the area and provide you an update in our follow-up to say where it's up to. So if you want that update, then it wouldn't take too much longer to add that in.
I would appreciate that, because I find it very concerning. Could I ask a question, Chair?
Yes.
When you were looking at this area of work, did you look at timeliness? Because that is often an issue, that an assessment is made, an agreement is drawn up, but the work doesn't happen in a very timely way, which just adds to the amazing vulnerability that some people are in. And I do think in the past it's been an issue. That's one thing. The other thing is, Stuart, there's been an underspend on this budget, which I find really concerning. And I find it concerning because the need is there. There's no doubt about that. So that suggests to me that, again, we've got a capacity issue in terms of delivery. I just wondered if that's right.
Okay, Stuart,
on the timeliness, do you want me to pick up the timeliness one?
Yes,
if that was picked up. So it wasn't a specific part of our review. Our main part of the review was to check compliance with the conditions. So these grants come with conditions to say they must have quotes, inspections, and all the other various things that I mentioned. So mainly it was to check, have the authority complied with what needs to be done in order to distribute the funds out, and obviously have individuals in private housing complied with what they need to, and is that documented? So that was the main focus. So there wasn't a particular focus necessarily on the timeliness. I mean, I could look back at our test schedule to see if there's anything from that, but it wasn't a key risk area as part of our review.
Okay. Stuart, any comments on the issue of the spending levels?
So a little bit on timeliness and underspend. So obviously it's a demand-driven budget. So it's not a spend budget. We don't set out to spend it. It's available if the demand's there. And in terms of the sort of timeliness and the drive, I believe one of the issues has been actually getting the assessments done through occupational health. So we have pondered whether we can do some direct engagement, because obviously we administer the DFG, Disabled Facilities Grant. We don't actually commission it per se. That is the realms of adult social care and health. So if they don't do the original assessments, then we can't necessarily expend the money, but we will look at it. But it's not a deliberate underspend. If we are able to use the funds as fast as possible, we will.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Any other comments on this? I don't hear any. Gurpreet, I tried to cut you off before. Can I say you've finished at this time?
You you can cut me off now. That's fine.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you in the nicest possible way. Thank you for your efforts on this. A very good and thorough report for us. Thank you very much. So I think in terms of my formal bit, I think we're just noting the recommendation. Right, that takes us on to more audit, but from LGSS this time, item 7. Stuart, do you want to say anything by way of introduction, or is this one being handed straight over to Duncan?
Apologies, Chair. I muted myself. I believe Duncan is arrived under a different name, and Jahinta might care to take the lead for us.
Yeah, technology for you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm representing Duncan. In terms of our progress update for 2019-20, obviously a decision was taken in conjunction with the finance director for us to curtail the plan, and that was kind of in recognition of obviously the increased workload on service teams that was brought on by the various projects or activities that were going on. So there's the Future Northants project, changes to LGSS working arrangements, staff working remotely, as well as obviously COVID-19 lockdown. And it was kind of felt that going out and trying to audit services when resources were being diverted to frontline was not really fair. So the 2019-2020 plan was curtailed. We have obviously cancelled 2 IT audits, but I think committee needs to note that these are being picked up in the ICT Future Northants work streams. So it is being looked at through that sort of project work stream. In terms of progress on the outstanding audits, they are as detailed in the report. The Aggresso IT review was a very comprehensive piece of work that did take a very long time, and we did work quite closely with both Stuart and Joanne on the IT securities around that system. The general ledger and treasury management audits, we would normally have started those near the year end because we like to get the full coverage of the year. But obviously that was distracted by COVID coming on board and work stopping. So we are looking to pick those up. And as it shows in the report, we have started work and we're doing field work on that. For the 2020-21 plan, our starting point is that we are looking to plan for 9 months. And we anticipate that even that 9 months might likely be flexed or reduced, given that staff across board are going to be involved with the unitary project, whether it's consultation, whether it's feeding into different work streams. So even though we're looking at 9 months, we are anticipating that that's going to be affected again. Our focus for the reviews this time will be much more on transactional testing rather than looking at systems. And that's because obviously systems are being aggregated, I think is the right word, are being aggregated as part of unitary. So we didn't think there was much mileage in giving an opinion on a system that's about to change. So we will focus on transactional testing and try and give some assurance as to accuracy over the transactions when they're being migrated over onto potential new systems. Also, obviously the shortness of time means that there is a need for us to start the work as soon as possible. So as we're showing on the report there, we're looking to start a few reports in September. And hopefully we will achieve the plan by the time vesting day comes along. And that's really all I wanted to say. So if there are any questions, happy to take some questions.
Okay, thanks for that. Any questions from committee members?
Nobody's indicating, Chair.
No, I'm not hearing. Can I just ask one question? And I understand this point about you know, the capacity issue of people and the sort of circumstances that we faced from February and are continuing to face. But what concerns me slightly is whether there is anything that's not being actioned that is causing a risk that we aren't being made aware of. Your report, and I think it's para 3.2, talks about 6 reviews not being completed. I don't know what those reviews are, but I just get slightly concerned that we might be taking a foot off the pedal, for want of a better expression, in terms of the sort of audit focus on what, after all, are key systems. That's why we look at, auditors look at these for year after year and so on. So I just wanted a sense of some, reassurance that that wasn't the case.
Included within those 6 reviews, Chair, are reviews that we've rolled into 2021, and we will try and incorporate that within the reviews that we're undertaking within 2021. So included in the 6 reviews would have been accounts payable, council tax, business rates, and we would look to go further back than normal. We wouldn't just stop at the start of the year. We will look to go further back into 2019, 2020 to cover those periods. So even though we're saying that for the 2021 plan, we will not just limit our reviews to just transactions within 2021. We'll look to go further back and pick anything.
Clearly those systems are, major council systems. Are any of them areas that have caused you concern in the past?
Not that I'm aware of, Chair, no.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for the update on that, and obviously we'll see you or Duncan back in future with a similar report. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay. So in terms of recommendation, I think the Audit Committee can note the proposed audit coverage for 2021. Thank you. Right, different subject now. I think item 8, we've got risk registers, which I think is Joe's turn to come to the table.
It is, thank you.
So Joe, would you like to introduce this one for us?
Yep, we have 3 risk registers for you this time on the request at the last audit committee. So the first one is the corporate risk register. So we have changes in the ratings for 3 of those, which is risk number 1. So that is an increase due to the cost pressures of COVID-19. Risk number 2 was reduced due to the member officer protocol being agreed by standards committee and at full council. And the last one, which was risk number 20, and there's an increase in the rating due to the ongoing discussions around LGSS. So they were the main changes from quarter 1, to the last one to this one. And really, it's to see if anyone has any questions on the corporate risk register before we move on to SCG.
Okay, do we have that up? Any questions from committee members?
No one's indicating, Chair.
No. Joe, can I just ask one, which is one that may have asked in the past, but it's item 10 on the risk register. You talk about impropriety on particular business activities leading to fraud, malpractice, which we show as high. We show that as major and likely. Can you just explain to me the rationale behind that?
I think from my point of view, it was something, because we rely on LGSS and NCC to provide some of the financial controls that we've got in place. Until we had the assurance from LGSS internal audit, assurance on the balance sheet reviews on the different things coming through, we're still in a position that we're never going to be, 100% comfortable, right, with the key controls that are in place. And I think really, that will still stay in place until that changes. I don't know if Stuart's got anything to add.
So, Chair, this one has cropped up before, and the answer will remain the same. By its very nature, we are a high volume, low value transactor. And as a result of that, you know, in the same way external auditors, when they do their audit plan, immediately write, there is a risk of fraud, inactivity, blah, etc., etc. So our risk register starts off on the premise of there's risk. And you know, whilst we have the controls, we have staff churn, we've got system issues, there's always attacks from outside, because this embraces external activity, not necessarily saying it's staff. So we know just from recent experience on the government base grants that literally millions were siphoned out of the Bayes grant fund, not from us. And we're already in discussions with some of the national fraud initiatives over various organisations that have clearly tapped every local authority they could. So by the very nature, we are transacting a lot. So we've got people that will try and be somebody else's identity, single person discount, claiming it wrongly. It's a fraud, and it's improper. So just by its very nature, our activity of collecting council tax, giving away benefits, there's always risk there. And no matter how much we do the controls, we will still be curious about whether there's more risk. You can't close it down completely.
I can say from the numerous transactions that you would give it a likely assessment, because you only need, like you said, one case. The one, the element that I suppose I'm less clear on is why it would be major. Or are you saying that it's because if it's only taking one case to turn it into major?
It's major because we don't just consider the value, we consider our history and reputation.
Right.
So you know, there are many different ways of looking at if somebody managed to get away with the fraud, how would it be perceived as much as anything else?
Right. Okay. So
it's not pure value. Right.
So I've maybe been a bit literal in terms of just taking it as value. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Yeah, at least I understand the rationale. Okay, that's helpful. Thanks for that. Back to you, Joe. In terms of your other registers.
Okay, so the second one is the SCG risk register, which is presented to the strategic command group on a weekly basis on a Wednesday. So they review it and update it as and when. We do circulate it quite frequently, and it is a moving document. So, you know, the one that you're seeing now, it's probably been updated since then. And obviously, because of the recent activity around Northampton, then that will have, we've probably got an additional one on there as well. So really, it's really for comment and say if anybody's got any comments, or if you think there's something missing off the strategic register. We also have a operational register as well, which has got an awful lot more risks on it than this one has.
Okay, thanks. Perhaps just pause there. Any comments from or questions from members? No.
No one's indicating, Chair.
No. Okay. Thank you. Okay, Joe. Any other points?
Okay, and the final one is the Brexit risk register, which has obviously taken a backseat to the COVID-19 for now. However, it's not that we've taken our eye off this one. We do keep an eye on what's happening in the press. We keep an eye on the bulletins that come out from MHCLG. So really, we kind of update this as and when we need to. Again, it's a working document. It's something that's going to be live, you know, for a good, well, certainly until we go into unit rate and probably beyond as well. Sure. So again, with this one, if the committee members want to review it, give any comments, any feedback, are we missing anything? So yes, please.
Okay. Picking up on that point, any comments or questions from members at this point?
Yes, please, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Joe. It's all really, really interesting information. One of the big risks for Brexit is going to be the disenfranchisement of many of our citizens who entered Britain through Europe with European citizenship and haven't got British citizenship. Yeah. So that's going to be a risk in all kinds of ways in terms of their ability to work, to take out private leases, all of that kind of stuff. Has there been any calculation of the impact of that? Because that's going to impact on our services.
It may do. I mean, certainly from an MDC point of view, we look at it from a workforce point of view initially.
Yeah.
So we can see, you know, how many people that may be affected. From speaking with the HR team, because obviously we work closely with them, it's a really low risk at the moment.
Right.
And I certainly know that there's quite a few of ours that are already, there's one in my team this week is going to be having a graduation, if you like, to go through.
Citizenship, yeah.
Yes, so we're certainly keeping an eye on it from a workforce point of view, and you know, we know exactly what's going on with that. From the wider borough, it's not something that we do from a Northampton point of view, but I think it's involved in like the business wide. So when we're talking to other businesses and finding out what's going on with them with Brexit, it's really getting an idea of how they're coping, you know, with their supply chains, with their workforce. So we are keeping abreast of it.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? No. Okay. So thank you for that.
Sorry, Councillor Marriott.
So this system doesn't work either. Never mind. I just wondered, obviously we touch on a number of things with the European Union, and I just wondered what impact it's had on grants, because there's quite a number of grants coming into the country from the European Union. So is that having any impact on local businesses, or anything that locally that we know that's going to be impacted because the grants will cease or won't be there in the future?
We did have a look at this, and we were assured by our finance colleagues that we haven't got any grants from the EU at present. Stuart?
So, Councillor, so our first port of call is we are actually a district borough, and we only have one core Euro grant that we are using against Falcon Works. In terms of the wider businesses, then that kind of goes out of our remit a bit. We're aware, we promote, but it's not part of our normal remit to go around to all businesses. So we advertise it. We work closely with Bays regional people. We work with SEMLEP. So all of the different organisations are actively promoting the change for Brexit to all the businesses, but it is outside our core remit in that sense as a council.
But it is going to impact us, because it's going to impact the enterprise zone, isn't it? Because the enterprise zone gets European grants, and it's impacting the university in terms of their research grants and their research capacity, and it's their research capacity that helps our businesses in lots and lots of ways. So there are going to be impacts, and it is going to impact on the local economy. So that is going to impact us, I would have thought.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments this on? No. Okay, thanks for that, Joe. And I think we're just noting your report as the recommendation. So thank you for that. Takes us on to item 9, which I think is our final report this evening, which is Chief Finance Officer's report. Stuart, can you introduce this one for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. So we tend to use this report really as a roundup to provide assurance about accounting policies and anything else that's happening or not happening that committee may be interested in. We've already updated on the statement of accounts for 1920. Following the recommendations down, there's been no changes to accounting policies. There's been no reportable incidents for Treasury management. It's probably worth the committee noting that at Cabinet there was an agreement to go forward to Council. And so all of that is just seeking approval to go forward. So we will be going to Council in September to seek to increase the HRA borrowing by 50 million. And as explained at Cabinet, that's more of a mortgage in principle. That doesn't mean we've got a specific scheme or schemes ready. That allows us to actually take schemes forward to Cabinet within the budget envelope permitted by full council. And so we have a number of schemes that we think are in the pipeline that we would like to progress, but we can only do that if we know we've got full council HRA approval to borrow in principle. In terms of the revised internal audit programme, I attached that as an appendix, but I think Gurpreet and Greg have sort of touched on it. We've agreed a revised internal audit programme for the current year, in part because of COVID, but not because we couldn't do the work, but we've actually been seriously engaged with the BDO, thank you very much, who have worked some very long hours and a lot of time to support us through the business grants. So we're fairly comfortable that we had a very secure process where each grant was actually pre-checked, whereas a number of local authorities are actually post-checking now, and that means asking for money back, or in some cases dealing with fraud. So I'm not going to say that we are completely clear of it all, but a couple of the national fraud names that have come up, we've actually had chapter and verse explaining why we rejected them. They failed our governance test. So although we may have suffered some not good press going through the process at not giving away our 35 million fast enough, we have now given away just shy, it's about 98-99%, but I, as a CFO, feel quite comfortable and confident that we did it in a pretty structured way, considering it was a new initiative, and I think gifting 35 to 36 million out in a space of about 16 weeks through an untested process. I'm very comfortable that I used BDO as my guides, along with LGSS and the Revs and Ben services, so quite comfortable with that. Otherwise, the report has sort of covered off the completing of the statement of accounts. The current budget position was presented at Cabinet last Wednesday. There'll be a further update in about I think it's about 2 weeks at the next September Cabinet. So, and that will be period 4. At the moment, for the Cabinet paper that just went through, we were forecasting an overspend of 1.434 million. We're still being very prudent because although we've seen some draft guidance from government about the grant that could come forward for fees and charges, until we actually see it in black and white and fully understand how we can claim it and exactly what the construction is, we need to remain prudent. But if it comes through in the form of the guidance, we anticipate that the actual forecast will reduce over the next couple of months as we can actually see some more grant coming through. There's a small element in the report 3.7 about LGSS update, which broadly says we are still waiting to understand where things lie with NCC, Cambridge and Milton Keynes. This has taken a bit longer to progress, partly through COVID, but this will also impact on some of the unitary work and understanding which parts of services will go forward as to the West Unitary or the North Unitary, and which bits may or may not remain in a lead authority model, as if it were LGSS, but not necessarily as LGSS. We continue to do a number of work streams going forward to unitary. There's regular CFO meetings. All the services are actively pursuing the work streams through Zoom meetings as much as anything else. And there's a number of checkpoints outside our control from central government where they will decide to go stop go. And my understanding is at the moment we are still on track to proceed. Other than that, open for questions, Chair.
Okay,
but obviously this covers a lot of ground, so if there's any really detailed ones, I'd need to take the questions away and answer them offline.
Sure. Okay, thanks. I think I saw Councillor. Yeah, Les, I can see you. I think waving.
Yeah, I must admit, I did warn you that my screen goes all funny every now and again. I've got some other voice on there now, so it goes all pixelated, but that's the laptop for you. Just one thing, Stuart, and it's probably not mentioned in the report, but Beverly Cook nowhere to raise it in this meeting. We've got a situation in Northampton, as you know, where we're high category when it comes to COVID at the moment, with a certain sandwich making factory causing some problems, which has been closed down. You mentioned the money's coming from central government for grants for the businesses. That's coming, obviously, but there are other impacts on our budget. It's been noticeable to me that staff's being moved around to ensure that people are playing ball out there in the community at the present time. So what impact is that having on our budgets, in particular, where staff are not doing the day jobs but doing other jobs, which you wouldn't normally expect them to do? And what other expenditure are you going to see coming back from the government from what we've actually started to spend out at the present time?
Just checking on. Sorry. Councillor Stone is regularly asked if we could tabularise the information I put forward to Cabinet. I suspect period 4 will be not a table. We're currently working through all of the data to understand are there tasks that we can't do at the moment because of COVID, in which case we're redeploying staff. Are there staff that we need to use for COVID, which does mean there's a reduced service somewhere else? And at the moment, we're trying to shuffle around all the costs. And then for mid-year, I will actually align the costs and the budgets and the actual grant received. In some cases, there's work where we might be doing licensing. So the environmental health crew might do some licensing activity, which they can't at the moment because COVID, there's either a lack of demand, in which case where they're working on COVID, they're working very hard, but they're not necessarily doing the day job, but the day job is not necessarily wholly there. Where we actually need to do some backfilling, we are bringing in some temps to try to alleviate some of the pressures. And if necessary, we're taking some decisions on some less core services to try to bolster those that are actively needed to support the COVID activity at the moment. That's probably the best reassurance I can give you, but we are keeping tabs, and that's why midway through the year I'll have a better understanding of whether the government has provided us with sufficient grant for our additional costs that we're incurring, or whether we've still got a gap.
If I can perhaps, sorry, is that okay, Les, in terms of?
Yeah, it is. But, you know, I'm also concerned about the day-to-day services that are not being carried out as well. So that's going to impact on other things that we've seen tonight, you know, when you look at when it's audited and targets not being met. So one thing is the budgetary side, you know, how much we're spending, are we going to get some back? The other side is what other services are actually failing because of that, you know, actually because the staff are not actually doing the day jobs, but doing COVID stuff, particularly at the present time, in the last week or two, where they've been pulled away because of the issues that have been caused, you know, in the Northampton.
Okay. Yeah.
So thanks anyway, Stuart.
So I mean, we're trying to redeploy the resources as much as we can. Obviously, as a council, we focus first on statutory services. We must protect our statutory services. Thereafter, we need to use the resources. It's not easy to bring some people in to just do a job for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So where we can bring some resource in, even if it's just admin to alleviate the pressure of some of the managers, we're actually trying to do that. But there are some services such as the museums and so on where COVID has closed them. So if we redeploy that resource, you know, the day service isn't being done, we will miss a performance indicator for the number of people coming into a museum, but we didn't suspend the service. We're using the resource in a different way, if that helps. But in the main, the core services have not been prevented. Obviously, homeless and housing, there's been a big focus on rough sleepers, temporary accommodation. You know, we are seeking to do the best we can to address all of those and keep everything rolling on. Obviously, there's working with MPH on how fast we can keep construction still going. So with many of our projects, you know, COVID is impacting on our ability to keep people on building sites and so on. But I am aware that MPH has worked very hard to keep contractors going, because the sooner people finish those works, the sooner we get more homes. So, you know, we are as a management board balancing all of that, and that's part of the risk register activities. And, you know, the SCG and TCG work of prioritisation.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Stuart, just on that sort of same theme, really. I did read the monitor report, and I think what I'm gleaning from you as well is you're trying to be prudent in terms of the position that's being presented, which is clearly understandable. And I'm conscious of the fact that I hear of other authorities that have sort of already reached for the need to cut services and cut posts and all the rest of it. I assume from what you're telling us so far that the council are hopeful they won't be able to be in that position. I'm probably asking you a question too soon, but I guess over the next 2 or 3 months, as you present more and more monitoring information, that position will become clearer. But I don't get a sense from either this report tonight or the report on which it's based that there's a, if you like, a panic at this stage. Is that fair to say?
So Cabinet's been really clear that whilst they would like to deliver a balanced budget, we have reserves, and we have reserves for a reason. The management board's been given a challenge to try to find some savings, and Councillor Stone's sort of raised concerns about whether we're trying to cut things. We're actually not trying to cut things. So some of the staff vacancy savings are natural. Somebody's left, we pause the vacancy, so we just wait a few extra weeks, or we're looking for a different resource to come in, so we pick some up, and there's some events that we're not running, so we're literally just picking up savings that where the money doesn't need to be spent for the sake of spending. At the same time, we are actively looking through the grant processes, trying to seek funding, and we think that will actually alleviate much of our problems, but we haven't then shied away from committing funds if we need to do the COVID activities. Obviously we need to deliver, but not at any cost, so as to speak. So we're trying to just deliver what we need to deliver that helps, but we're also keeping a bit of an eye on the money. Okay, thanks.
And the other couple of points, if I may, just whilst I'm speaking, raise. We've spoken before about the audit fee, and I was pleased to see in your report that there's a reference of taking that to PSAA. So that was good, and I suppose I would ask that you perhaps, in the format of this report, you can perhaps keep us up to date in future to see where that is actually going, because clearly none of us are happy about that position, but hopefully the PSAA can look at that favourably for us. And then the other point was really the LGSS update, which we know we've talked earlier tonight about some of the issues there. It would be helpful to have that update as part of any future report in this area. So a couple of pleas from me for the next session, if that's possible. I think they're the only other comments I've got on the report. Just put it back to the committee, though. Any other questions from members? Yes, I can see Councillor Stone. Yeah.
Yeah, just quickly, Stuart, did I read this morning that the government has lowered the interest rates for the PWLB loans from?
Apologies, I haven't. We started a bit early with corporate management, but I haven't caught up on my emails, news, and BBC web app yet. It hasn't popped up through any of my advisor services, but we'll look for it.
Yeah, I couldn't give you a cast iron guarantee, but it's the sort of thing that I normally pick up, and I haven't seen anything today, but rather like Stuart, I can't guarantee that that's the position.
I think it's worth looking out for. I'm sure if it's happening, you'll obviously be told, won't you? But I think I read it as one of the government's responses to COVID. It's because local authorities are something like £69 billion out of pocket because of COVID. And I think I was reading earlier on that this might be one of the government's responses. It's just worth keeping an eye on that. The other issue, I really look forward to the tabulation of all the losses and income and all of that around COVID. I think it'll be really important for us to understand that, because I'm sure this crisis won't be the last one, and you know, we need to be really tight on how we manage it in the future, as we have done here. And I think your approach with the business rate grants was absolutely right, and I'm really pleased that we haven't had any major incidences of fraud around all of that. There is one other question I wanted to ask though, and that is about the impact of COVID in the workplace. The threat that we're under of having another lockdown, which would further damage our local economy and then further damage our own budget in terms of business rates collection and rents and stuff like that. And it seems to me that one of the highest risks in all of that is HIMOs. It's 0-hour contract workers, low paid workers only being able to afford HIMOs. And I'm really worried about that. And I'm really worried that HIMOs may be seen as a solution to our homelessness problems. I don't think it is a solution. I think it will cost us a lot more money in the long run. So I'm just a bit nervous about that.
So just two parts really. One is I believe, having spoken to leader and portfolio holder, we will give you a group leaders briefing on COVID costs, so that you are as aware as we can share. In terms of the HIMOs, I understand your concern. I'm told by some of my colleagues that there's differences over who wishes to live in a HIMO and who has to live in a HIMO and where they work. But certainly that's for licensing and the housing group. I'll take your concern away and I'll pass that forward to the relevant board members.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. Any other comments on Stuart's paper? No, I'm not hearing any. So that, I think, finishes us in terms of the papers. I think the only thing I'd want to raise is just that I think the next meeting is scheduled for September. I think we ought to keep that under review, and it may be that it makes more sense to perhaps move it into October to facilitate some of the work that's being done on the final accounts. But if members could just bear with me on that, so we won't scratch September just yet, but it could be that we push back just a few weeks into October to pick up the accounts issues. But other than that, I think we've finished. So if I can formally close the meeting and thank you all for your contributions, and look forward to seeing you in either September or October. Okay, thanks a lot.